Stillman and Company 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
So I am about to do something that I would almost think that I would never, ever, ever, ever do in the month of November. Like never, ever, ever, ever do. Ian, I'm going to put you on the spot here. It's a Stillman and Company trivia question for you.
Okay.
What is the one thing when it comes to hockey that the team will do, the broadcasters will do, we might do, as part of promoting a game, hey, 1025 The Game has the game tonight against the Washington Capitals at 6 o'clock. But I vow to never do it unless it is actually this.
A big game?
I never say something's a big game if it's not actually a big game. There is nothing. And look, I get it, business and TV. You turn on the TV tonight on maybe it's Max on the pregame, or maybe it's on the FanDuel Sports pregame with Lindsay, whatever. You'll turn it on, and I can't tell you how many times I hear it's a big game tonight. And I'm like, is it a big game tonight? Because most of the time, these big games are just random run-of-the-mill regular season games. Now, if you're in the middle of March and you're fighting for a playoff spot and you got to have it and it's against the team you're going, that's a big game. And if it's a big game, I'll tell you it's a big game. Tonight, in the month of November, the Nashville Predators play the Washington Capitals, an Eastern Conference team, on a Wednesday night. 9 times out of 10, or I could even say 9.9 times out of 10, I would look at a game like today's and I would say, yeah. They've got a feature on YouTube, the NHL does, where you can watch the highlights of the game. There are some times that I will not watch a regular season November-ish game Tuesday night against Calgary when there's something big, something, especially like if there's a big Thursday night football game on, something like that. I want to catch up, see what happened. I can watch it on the FanDuel app or whatever, but I can also watch it, I can go back and watch it, the highlights, see what happened so that I've got an idea. And this is the kind of game that would usually be that. Not for me tonight. Tonight, my butt will be right on the couch, and I will have the Predators on because it is a big game tonight. I am not willing to throw in the towel on the 2024-2025 Nashville Predators, but I'm worried. The number one thing I'll never do is I'll never tell you something is a big game if it is not a big game. I hate when people do that. Again, in an 82-game hockey season, how many games are really, truly big games? 7? Tonight's one of them. I was talking to Vingan on the way out. Vingan was talking about how I said, okay, what do they need to do in order to drag themselves out of this? The mess they've created for themselves, for whatever reason it may be, and I've got my reasons for why I think they're in the mess they're in. I said to Vingan, I go, what do they need to do? Because Adam's great at always having the, can I do a nerdy voice for Vingan? Should I do a nerdy voice for Vingan? I've never done a Vingan impression before, I don't think.
Yeah, just be nice.
Vingan will send me these texts that are like, the Predators need to go 5-7-3 in the next 18 games. Like he's always got the stats or whatever to tell you what they need to do, and he always sends it to me. And he said to me, with 7 of the next 8 on the road, and again, they play on the road today, they play on the road tomorrow, they play at home Saturday, and then the CMA road trip comes up, and they are gone. And Barry Trotz is incredibly excited about this long road trip because I think he thinks that 2 guys are getting distracted by being at home. They haven't bonded together by being on the road, those kind of things. Vingan thinks they need to get 11 out of 16 points. So something along the lines of 5-3-1 is what they're looking at in order to get themselves out of the mess that they're in. Where the Predators find themselves right now, I keep waiting for a turn the corner type performance. I really thought Saturday against Colorado, granted, it wasn't the typical Colorado Avalanche that we're used to seeing. There were a lot of guys that were out there on the ice Saturday that I'm like, who the hell is that for Colorado? Now, I know McKinnon, and I know McCarr, and I know Rantanen, and I know Middlestat. Other than that, I'm not sure I knew Sam Girard. I knew him. I didn't know half the guys out there for Colorado. But they won the game convincingly. They played tough, they played tight, and they won convincingly Saturday. And I thought, let's see if this is the game that springs them and gets them back into action, and they'll be okay, and and then they go out there against the Kings and lay a total egg. Well, where the Predators sit right now, if they lose today, it's not going to end the season. But they have got to get on the right track. And they've got to do it now. It's like, if you've ever been overweight before, a lot of you out there know what I'm talking about. I certainly have had these talks, and they are not fun. But when you sit down with the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good, you got to lose weight. You got to lose weight. It's never like the doctor says, start a diet on Monday. No, it's start today. This team is too good. This team is too talented. This coach, in my opinion, is too good of a coach for this team to be this bad. And there are guys on this team that I'm not interested to think that certain players that aren't good were good. And there's going to have to be changes like there are every year for a hockey team down the stretch. But even with those guys that I think are underperforming, they can still get on the right path. It's doable to get 11 points out of the next 8 games. It's doable. But it's harder and harder if you lose tonight. Because now all of a sudden you got to get 11 points in 7 games. So that 5-3-1 now has to be 5-2-1. And then you play tomorrow against the defending Cup champions. I mean, these aren't two bum teams. Washington, I think, has surprised people with how good they've been so far this year. But at some point, this has got to go in the opposite direction. I can only say I'm concerned for so long. I can only say, I'm a little worried before all of a sudden I start to say, no, this team stinks. And each time I start to get a little optimistic about what I think I'm looking at when it comes to the Predators, every time I start to feel that way, they go out and they have a Monday night performance. Goal goes in the net 40 seconds into the game. Anytime they need a push, they don't get it. They end up giving up a goal. Michael McCarron falls down right in front of the net against Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton every time. And they did this to themselves by starting 0-5. And we know that. But I wasn't ready to give up on the season at 0-5. And I'm not ready to give up on the season at 4-7-1. When they got to 3-5, I thought, okay, they're fine. But then they started to struggle again. So Barry's right. In each 5-game increment that they play, they got to get 6 points. And so here you go. Tonight against Washington, it's the start of the road trip. Ryan O'Reilly put his hand up the other night after the game, said, I sucked. And I think he did that as a message to everybody else to say, hey, you need to start admitting that you suck too. It's the old Terry Crisp-ism. We used to have Crispy on the show every week when he was doing the games. And we'd say, Crispy, what do you think the Predators need to do? And Crispy used to say this all the time. He used to say, what they need to do is they need to go get a bunch of mirrors. And they need to put each mirror in a locker stall. So when those guys get to the rink, they can look in the mirror. And I think that's what O'Reilly did. Again, I don't think O'Reilly saying, I sucked on Monday night was really about O'Reilly. I think it was, hey, Yossi, you suck. Forsberg's doing okay. Nyquist, you've sucked. Stamkos, Marchessault, you've sucked. Tommy Novak, you've sucked. Time to get going. The coach. I've never heard the coach this mad in the 2 years he's been coaching this team. And even Barry, when Barry was on the show yesterday, Barry's just lobbing grenades right at the locker room. So how do you get out of this? You win. Winning cures all. you go on a winning streak. Well, you can't go on a winning streak if you don't start with 1. Barry said it when they started off 0-5, and he came on the show. And he said, we haven't had a road trip. We got to get out of town. We've got too much of my family's in town and they're coming to the game and they're staying with me. And I've got to take my kids to the zoo at this time. And I've got to this and I've got to. Well, now they're on the road. Remember last year when they got hot? What was it? St. Louis, Vegas, LA, Edmonton. It was a West Coast swing. Well, they're starting essentially a long, long, long road trip right now today. And they got to win. So I never do this. I never say in November it's a big game because, again, what happens in November other than the actual points themselves pretty much has no bearing on anything that will matter come May. But I think in this case, it's hard for me to envision any reality where the Predators don't turn it around quickly. And so tonight against Washington, even though it's a Wednesday interconference matchup in November, and it's early November, it's a big game, and they need it. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. We're starting Preds today. 615-737-1025. Plus, what Barry said yesterday on the program, boy, it shocked me. If you were watching the YouTube chat or the YouTube stream yesterday, if you saw me on the stream when Barry Trotz said what he said, I mean, I was stunned. And it's had a ripple effect. We'll get to that next. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5 The Game. I love Window Nation. That's right. Window Nation, they are the best. Window Nation's come out to my home. They've taken care of replacing windows for some of my friends, and they can do the exact same for you. Experts say that heating costs are increasing up to 23% this winter. And if your windows are not from Window Nation, then your money is literally going right out the window. They have some of the best insulated windows money can buy. That's right. So the heat will stay inside. And when I talk about money, the best that money can buy, you're actually going to get double the value because right now, these amazing Window Nation windows are 50% off. That's right. Did you hear that? 50% off. Plus, you can save even more with 0% interest finance for 5 years. 0% interest for 5 years. Hurry up because the sale ends November 30th. So schedule your fast in-home estimate right now by calling 866-90NATION or by visiting windownation.com. That's 866-90NATION, and that's windownation.com. how far away are we from the Barry Trotz hitting the time for him to do something massive button?
Well, I think, we get on the road here a little bit. I'm trying to do some things right now. We will be limited a little bit because of some of the contracts that we do have. If we don't get it going, then I'm going to start our rebuild plan a little bit. What we did in the summer was, as I say, fantasy hockey until we become a good team. If we do not become a good team, then we're going to see a lot more of our kids starting their process. Like I said, we brought in the veteran players to extend this year and be a threat. I think I used the term. And then hopefully in the next coming years, our young guys come in and they take a bigger role. So if we fall out into a position where we fall out and it's not happening or it doesn't come together, then I'm going to start probably that process, and you're going to see some kids and we'll start our process on getting them the needed games that they need and start developing them and still trying to win because we've got some good players. But we're gonna shake it up if we don't get going pretty soon, for sure. It's a cultural thing. I don't like losing. I didn't come here to lose. That's why we tried to do the things that we did this summer. So
there you go. That was Barry Trotz on the show yesterday. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I was shocked when he said that on the program. Again, Barry's more of a straight shooter than everybody else. But I was saying, hey, how far away are you from the Barry Trotz is going to have to do something? I wasn't going to say hit the panic button, but the Barry Trotz does something massive that can't be reversed button. How far away are you from doing that? And clearly he's thought about it because he told you exactly what he's going to do. And then he followed up with Alex Daugherty of the Tennessee. And I guess Alex heard that. Now, I actually am kind of glad Alex did follow up with Barry because, I mean, he basically was like, so hold on, whoa, what's this mean? Or at least that's the tone I got from the article. And Barry said, look, I'm not going to tear it down to the studs, not moving Shea and Marchessault and Stamkos and Forsberg and Yossi and Saros, but everybody else could. I mean, everybody else could be on the chopping block is essentially what Trotz said. And I was shocked because normally, even if guys are thinking that, you don't want to say like, hey, I'm thinking if it doesn't work out, I'm going to have to divorce my wife. You don't want to say that. But I got to tell you, I was stunned because a lot of general managers in any sport, but even the NHL, right, 12 games in to spending $100 million would not say something like that because of how it would reflect on the GM. Like, again, the GM's the one who spent the money. The GM's the one who brought in Stamkos. The GM's the one who brought in Marchessault. The GM's the one who's brought in Brady Shea. The GM's the one who's kind of maxed him out to the cap. And so to go 12 games in and say, hey, I'm already planning. If this doesn't work, here's what we're doing. Most guys wouldn't do that because it's a reflection of their GMing, which takes me back to Trotz. Trotz either doesn't care what ownership thinks, and I think Trotz is smarter than that and has been around the block long enough, or he's got carte blanche from Bill Haslam to do whatever he wants to do. And that is a good spot to be in. Again, technically, as of right now, Herb Fritch is the majority owner of the team, but I believe Bill Haslam has taken over as the chairman, and I believe this time next year, Bill Haslam will be the majority owner of the Predators and the chairman. Bill Haslam's guy in charge. And we all know Bill Haslam. He was governor. And clearly, if Barry Trotz is going to go on the show, and I think that was a message to the locker room, a message to Tommy Novak and to Michael McCarron and to Jeremy Lazan and to those guys, Dante Fabro. And if you want to have a season, to the guys he can't move, if you want to have a season, get it together now, or else I'm bringing up these young guys and we're going to live through their pain, which means you're going to lose. And for the older guys that aren't locked in, again, the Novaks and the Lazans and if you want to keep your spot, start playing better. But you don't do that if you don't have the complete and utter trust of ownership. Because again, It's a reflection of your own GMing to say, what I invested $100 million in is not working. And a lot of guys don't want to do that. And let me say this, good for Barry Trotz. You know, Floyd used to always tell me, a GM has two options. You can either do your job or you can protect your job. And you guys know the difference between the two, right? You do your job. Hey, you might lose because you're setting up the organization for the long term, and people may be tired and it may get you fired. Protecting your job would be, well, I can take the young quarterback, but we're going to lose with the young quarterback. So instead, let me sign Sam Darnold, and then we'll use our pick on a pass rusher. We'll use our pick on a receiver. We'll use our pick on a, because I'm protecting my job, because we got to win games right now. Trading away a first-round pick for a player who's ready to go. That's protecting your job. And Trotz, in my opinion, has zero regard for how it would look if he were to say in 6 weeks, all right, enough's enough. Kimmel's coming up, and I guess they can't bring up Mullendike this year. They already made that choice at the beginning of the year. That may be one they end up regretting. But Kimmel's coming up, and Svechkov's coming up, and somebody else is coming up, and we're just sorry. Zero regard for how it would look. And that tells me that he's not worried about protecting his job, or that the public sentiment is not something that he's going to sit back and cry about and worry about what we say and and I got to say, it takes cojones in order to be able to do that. And it tells me that he's really worried about finding ways to win hockey games. And I'm on board with that. Because I'm on board, if this isn't going to work, and I thought it was going to work, if this isn't going to work, I'm totally okay with going through the pain of a season with the hopes that next season will be better. Now, you can't do this for 7 years in a row. Can't do that. I mean, at some point, it's like, hey, we need to see some results. But again, I appreciate the honesty and the fact that Barry Trotz, I guess in this instance, is worried about doing his job and not protecting his job. And again, I go back to the assumption that I made about Bill Haslam, which is that Governor Haslam has the belief in Barry Trotz that even if this doesn't work, he can say, that's fine because we have a backup plan and this is plan B. And they can exercise it. Unlike other owners that would be like, I just spent $100 million and you want to bring up Kimmel? Yes. Which tells me that, again, they probably talk things through and that Bill Haslam trusts Trotz and what he's doing at this point. 615-737-1025. We are to your phones. 615-737-1025. Plus, when it comes to me and the Predators, there's one guy in particular who, and I don't think it's his fault, but I think there's one guy in particular that's kind of screwing it up. There's a bunch of guys that, hey, this guy needs to play better, or I'd rather not even watch this guy play anymore. But there's one guy in particular that I'm just convinced was a bad move. We'll get to that coming up. Tomorrow is your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexro tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m.
Well, I mean, if there was just one thing, I think we'd have figured it out by now, and we wouldn't be in the position. It's probably not that easy to dissect. There's stretches where we look pretty good, and then there's stretches where we aren't, and we have some new guys in some new places, and sometimes it takes some time to adjust. But at the end of the day, I think it just kind of boils down to we just have to execute better, and that's executing the game plan. That's executing, with the puck. It's executing without the puck, being in the right positions. It's just been a little sloppy at times, and we know it's not necessarily a work ethic thing. We have guys that care in the room and want to go out and do their thing in the games, but sometimes there's just been some sloppy play that's crept in, and we're trying to go out here on the road. Maybe that'll be something that can help our group is to get out and play some road games and be together, and it's going to be a challenge, but we'll see what we're made of.
Steven Stamkos on Robbie and Joe this morning, and you hear right there where, again, that was kind of the Chris Sanders is going to join us at the in about 15 minutes. You know what, Ian? You know what Chris would call that? What Stamkos just said?
What's that?
Cliche-ish and coach talk. Chris is
Maybe,
like,
yeah.
I don't mean to sound cliche-ish and coach talk, but that's what that's on. Barry Trotz comes on. It wasn't we're giving it our all and we're just not executing and we're not no. Barry's the opposite, which I appreciate. So there's a one guy, again, people will say, well, Stamkos 5-on-5, maybe he's washed. That was a bad signing. Or Brady Shea defensively, they have really struggled. Maybe that was a bad signing or whatever. Saros, they really gave him the world and he hasn't even won a playoff series yet. So maybe you'll say that was a bad sign. Those to me, we'll see. But there's one move they've made that at the time I was, but okay. And now I'm like, yeah, that wasn't a good move and they need to remedy this. And that's Tommy Novak. Tommy Novak stinks. I've seen enough from Tommy Novak. Everybody will say, Jared, we need a second line center. And you're right. But I knew that at the beginning of the season. I knew that when they signed both guys. And I said, I guess I'd make Colton Sissons the second line center. And everybody was like, Colton Sissons? And I was like, well, he's a veteran and he can center it a little bit. And he's not terrible in his own end. And he's, he's okay in his own end. He's not terrible in the offensive end. Like he could be on a second power play unit and it not totally hold you back. And then Andrew Burnett came on the day that they signed Stamkos and Marchessault. And he said, yeah, I'm going to let Tommy Novak get the first crack at centering that line. And that's fine. But I've seen enough from Tommy Novak. He's just not good enough. In fact, he might not be good at all. I said he stinks earlier. Stinks might be a little strong. He's just kind of okay. That's what, when it comes to Novak, that's what he is. But last year, and really the year before that, so when the Predators were waving the white flag in 2023, they traded away Granlund and Niederreiter and Ekholm and everybody. And Ryan Johansson got hurt. So they had to call up a bunch of guys from Milwaukee, some of which were Scarbinis and some of which were Luke Evangelista guys that they had some serious juice invested in. And so one of them was Tommy Novak. And I think we all kind of thought Tommy Novak was a Scarbini at that point, but he actually played okay. Played well enough to earn a shot at making the team the next year. And he did. And for about the first half of last year, he was okay. Flashed a little offensive potential here and there. Clearly not a big guy, clearly not good at his own end, but a little offensive potential, playmaking ability. He and Evangelista, like, maybe this could work as a second line center. Then his contract was up. And I was never a big Tommy Novak guy, but Elliot Friedman went on the midday show and he said that he was hearing that Tommy Novak might be worth a first round pick. And I was like, first round pick for Tommy Novak? And Barry came on the show and he was like, I need to get a deal done with Tommy Novak or he will be on another team because I'm not going to lose him for nothing. Like, okay. But I knew he wasn't that good. And Elliott was talking about him signing a contract that started with the number 4. And I was like, no, you're not going to start with the number 4 for Tommy Novak. And they ended up signing him. What is it? 3.25?
I think that sounds right.
Yeah, 3 years, 3.25. And I said, when they signed, I said, it's good. Because if he pops and he becomes a really good player, then you'll get him at 3.25 for 3 years. And then you'll have to give him a big contract. But because he becomes a good player, you'll want to give him the big contract. And if he stinks, it's a contract you can move. Well, as soon as he signed that contract, he kind of went back to stinking.
3.5.
Boy, I like 3.25 better. But 3.5, I guess it is what it is. Not that big of a difference. He kind of stinks. I mean, in the playoffs last year against Vancouver, he looked like a boy out there against grown men. Did not look like he belonged. Vancouver went right at him in the road games. When he got on the ice, Vancouver bullied him, and they had no answer for it. So between that and what we've seen him do this year, which is really nothing, I'm of the belief that they're going to have to get rid of Tommy Novak because they don't have the cap space to go get a second line center. So what you'll have to do is, let's say, acquiring a second line center, and I don't know what Elias Lindholm went for last year when Vancouver acquired him, but I'm going to guess it was probably a second round pick. So let's say there's a second line center out there, and there will be, at some point, there will be a second line center that is a rental player that is available that you can sign, maybe, or that you can trade for. Maybe you sign them. I don't know. Maybe you don't. But you've got the ammunition with all the first round picks.
They got a player and a first and a conditional 4th.
That's a lot.
And 2 defensive prospects.
That's a lot for Elias Lindholm. Then again, Elias Lindholm's pretty good. It was a first for Middlestad too, right? Like a first to the Flyers and a first.
Maybe a second somewhere.
Yeah.
First or a second.
Colorado to acquire Casey Middlestad. That's the kind of player they got to get. Well, you got to trade Tommy Novak in order to get that $3.5 million off the books, and you got to attach a pick to it when you get that second line center. So it's going to cost you not double, but it's probably going to cost you the price and a half. So if Ian's saying that Elias Lindholm, and I don't know if there will be an Elias Lindholm out there this offseason or this trade season, but if Ian is saying Elias Lindholm was a first, a player, and 2 prospects, then in order to get that guy for you, it'll be that plus probably another prospect and probably another pick, though not a first, in order to get rid of Tommy Novak. But I think you kind of have to do that because
they actually traded Middlestad for Bowen Byram.
That's right. Because it was like 2 separate transactions.
Then Sean Walker. Yeah, he was traded for the Flyers
for Johansson and a first.
Conditional first. Yeah.
So that was, again, the 2 moves that Colorado made at that point. That's what you're going to have to do. And for me, you're going to have to get rid of Tommy Novak because he stinks. Well, stinks might be a little strong. He just doesn't do anything. Is that fair to say? One texter says, if you had to pick between Novak and Fabro, who would you pick? Novak, because he makes more money. Caleb says, trade Fabro. And also going to need to trade for the best center possible at the deadline that is not Mikhail Granlund. Ian and I were going over some names. It's like right now you don't know who's going to be good and who's going to be bad. It's like, do you do that for Radek Faksa? Like, he's probably more of a bottom 6 guy. So it'll have to be something that somebody stinks and there's a guy, maybe he's got a little term, and then you go out and make the deal. But yes, I would agree. They're probably going to need to trade for a second line center. And that's what I think the next Barry Trotz move is to trade for a second line center when he can. Justin says, I love Barry Trotz. That man speaks the truth. He was sending a message to his players, get better or get benched. I like that. But he's not going to bench.
For Chris.
Yeah, but he's not going to bench Stamkos or Marchessault or any of those guys.
No.
It's more McCarron and Jankowski and Novak and Lazan and those guys that he's saying like, hey, I'm going to sit you if that's the case. Chris Sanders will join us next. And here's what I wonder. Before we talk to Chris, I've got a bone to pick with everybody out there in Titanland that thinks the Titans magically played better on Sunday than they've been playing. They didn't play better. They played the same. They just happened to play a terrible team. Let's see. I do wonder if Chris looks at that win on Sunday as if this is a jumping off point or a sign of growth or anything more than what I think it was, which was you're a horrible team playing a horrible team and the ball didn't bounce their way. It bounced your way. We'll see. That's next. Stillman & Company, 615-737-1025. This week's Nashville's best deals from Black Rabbit. Black Rabbit is a great spot to enjoy some Nashville vibes with craft cocktails, delicious food, and live music. Just steps from iconic venues. It's perfect for a night out. Snagging a $50 gift card for only $25 is a fantastic way to experience it. Get yours now at thegamenashville.com/deals while supplies last. Be sure to come swing by or tune in for the award-winning pregame show. It'll be me, Chris Sanders, and Derek Mason at Twin Peaks and Cool Springs this Sunday from 9:30 to 11:30. That's right. We're going to do it at the normal time, 9:30 to 11:30, even though the Titans play a later game, which I got to tell you I'm in favor of. So when you wake up on Sunday morning, 9:30 to 11:30, we'll still have the award-winning pregame show. And it's presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck Nashville, Sloan's Motorcycle ATV, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon, which we should all be excited about. Former Titans receiver Chris Sanders joins us now on the program, as he always does, presented by Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Chris, I want to start here with you. What did you make of Sunday's win?
I mean, it's a team that was desperate for a win, and you saw the emotion by Brian Callahan after the game, because he got emotional because they won a game. But they finally won one. I know it's not against a good team, against the Patriots. I know they're even worse than the Tennessee Titans. But even though their record is bad, they got to win in the NFL, and that's exactly.
Chris, I'm kind of impressed.
Yeah, no, whoa, hold on. Let me hit the phone. Let me hit the phone, because you never say that. You never say that you're impressed. Absolutely at all.
I'm not impressed with them. I'm impressed with you.
Oh, you're impressed with me. Okay.
I figured you were going to do what they did. Trevor came on the show yesterday and was like, man, the Titans, they really showed that they're improving, or they really I'm like, they did the same stuff they do every week. They were just playing a terrible team. Like this idea,
ball bounced their way.
It did bounce their way. They get the strip sack and the ball bounced. I mean, Stevenson, the running back for the Patriots, he's right there. He could just dive right on the ball, and he tries to, but it didn't bounce to him. And then Jaquan Jackson fumbles the ball, and so yes, it bounced their way. I do want to ask you this.
Sure.
Take your player shoes, off to the side and think of this kind of big picture here. What is left to accomplish this year for the Titans? The trade deadline is over. We know they're not making the playoffs. We know they're not competing for the Super Bowl. And I mean, I guess you could argue that they're still evaluating Will Levis. I'm not sure they are. So for a fan week in and week out, what is there to really pay attention to or be excited about this season?
I mean, you want to give the fans some hope. And when you give the fans some hope, if you go 1 or 2-15, you're not going to give the fans hope for next year. I think that if you have some good showings in this game, your quarterback plays okay, your defense stays number one, and NWI keeps making a touchdown each and every week, it still gives you some hope that if you go in the draft, add some pieces and try to make something happen. But if you go out and squander and the quarterback plays terrible and the defense gives up big plays and, Jeffrey Simmons doesn't get any more sacks and Arden Key doesn't play well and, guys get hurt, you're not going to be optimistic. You're not going to say, okay, next year we can do something great. But if you have a good showing in these games and, end up with a pretty decent record, as a fan, it still gives you hope to try to do something next year.
Okay, so now put your player shoes on. Do you think that matters? Like, does it matter? Like, if they play well at the end of the year, does that actually have a tangible benefit going into next year?
Yeah, it does. But here's what you got to understand too is, a lot of guys are playing for roster spots for next year. A lot of guys are auditioning for another team. So guys are going to play hard. If you have a guy that's loafing and you have a guy that's not making plays, then he's not going to be here next year. He's not going to be on another team. So, even though the record's bad, even though, they're not a good team right now, if guys start playing well and guys start to develop like Will Levis and different guys can step up, then now you can go into the draft and get some guys. Now you can go and get some guys to help this team. Just like perfect example, 1999, we had some good players. We had some great leadership, and then we got some other guys that we added. We added Samari Rowe, Javon Curse, Kevin Dyson to add to the mix of players that we had, and it gave us hope in 1999 that we can basically do something.
Chris Sanders is with us on the program. Speaking of Levis, do you think there is still something there that could be made that could give him the opportunity to be the quarterback next season, or are we just playing out the final 9 games until the Titans can move on?
I think it's up to him, Jared. I really do. I really do. I think it's up to him if he can gain his confidence back. I know he's saying the right stuff. I know he's playing a bravado role, and I know I'm saying it in a respectful way, but he's got to go out there and make plays. And if he gets that confidence back, that swagger that he had a little bit when he had at camp, that, okay, I'm going to make the play, I'm going to be that dude, then you can evaluate and say, okay, maybe he could do something for us next year. But if he plays in these next couple of games and he throws interceptions, and he acts like he has confidence. He's making those hero plays where he's throwing the ball backwards and throwing interceptions and playing pick six. Then now, and I hate to say this, now you might just have to maybe set him to the side and start to build your roster up with maybe getting a quarterback or getting somebody else.
So
you hate to say that.
With that being said, what are your expectations for Will Levis? And I want to be fair here when I say this, because
sure.
On one hand, when it comes to Levis, I can argue he doesn't have a right tackle. His starting center just went out. They traded away his best receiver. His second receiver can't catch the ball. So what is he really supposed to do? On the other hand, it's like he's got 7 interceptions in 5 games. His QBR is like 26, and he kind of stinks. So what can he actually, like, how much is there? Like, is there any potential that he can actually turn it around?
It is, but the one thing I want to see with Will Levis, I just want to see some consistency. If I can see some consistency in his play, and because there's times where he throws some good balls, there's some times where he makes some great plays, but I want to see a whole game where he's been consistent. I don't want to see what we did in Green Bay where he threw a pick six, or another pick six, what he did with the Chicago Bears. I just want to see a game where he's 20 for 26, 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, and then come back the next week and actually do the same. So if I can see some consistency and see some growth and see some things that he took from the practice field into the playing field, then maybe as a coaching staff and maybe as a general manager, I can say, okay, maybe he has a little something that we can keep developing. But if he goes out there and continuously throws interceptions and continuously does the wrong thing, then as a organization, I might have to back up away and just kind of figure out and put somebody else that can do the job.
How do you go 20 to 26 when Calvin Ridley can't catch?
Come on, Mr. Positive. I mean, he still had 5 for 73. I mean, he
is a liability out there right now catching the ball.
And the thing about it is, that's what I talk about. When he came from Jacksonville, even though he had 1,000 yards, I think 1 or 2 years, he still was inconsistently catching the football. So that's what he's going to have to improve on. Yeah, he had 5 for 73, and yes, the week before he had 10, for 143. But he's got to make the big catch at the right time. You can't say, okay, I catch the hitch, I catch the curl. You got to make the big play and be consistent with your hands.
Do you believe that the Titans are anything better than the worst team in the league? I mean, right there with New England, overtime at home. They needed the bounces. We know New England's awful. We know New England's rebuilding. Do we think that the Titans, that there's any upside?
I think there is. And the reason why I say there's some upside is your defense is still playing at a high level. I really believe that. I know the numbers are kind of miscued with them being the number 1 defensive league, but they're still a solid defense. They're still doing some good things.
Yeah, but did you see the last play with Drake May? Like, that, good defenses don't do that.
I know, but that's just a crazy play. I mean,
he had 11 seconds in the pocket.
I know, but just imagine you trying to cover me for 14 seconds. I mean, that's just tough to do for anything, because the guys are running around and sometimes you lose your guy. But I really do think there's an upside, because the defense is playing well, but what the things that they need to work on is the other things. It's the special teams. It's really catching the football. It's the quarterback not making mistakes. It's those things that we're talking about. But the upside of this Tennessee Titans team is your defense. Arden Key, Simmons is playing better. Amani Hooker with 2 interceptions. Landry, all those guys you can build from to take it to the next level when they can.
What'd you make of Brian Callahan's tears after the game?
You know what? I absolutely love it. I know you're like, oh, that's just phony and this and that.
I did not say that. No, I did not. I said I wasn't going to get on him. I said I wasn't going to get on him because these guys put a lot of time into this. And, I mean, if they don't win any games, there's a chance they might get fired, and he knows that.
Right. I don't think it's more than just not getting fired. It's this, and I'll be quick with the story. Last year we started 0-4, and we went up and we played Father Ryan, and we were down 13-0. And now
that's an NBA.
The NBA, and now you're feeling like, oh my God, can we even win a game? We come back and beat Father Ryan, and I watch my head coach cry. It's not that he's crying because he's trying to, muster up something for the team. It's because, man, we fight. We meet for 6 and 7 hours. We get these guys ready, and to get a win, it's kind of like a piano's off your back. And then I watched his interview. I really believe that those were genuine tears, because all the stuff they went behind closed doors, all the negative stuff that we go through, all the, the fans talking about you, the parents talking about you, everybody talking bad about you. And it's kind of like, okay, now I can breathe because I got to win. And that's how I saw it.
Chris Sanders, as always on our program. Chris, great
We didn't get in
stuff.
an argument this time, man.
I know we were yelling at each other last time.
Nah, you my
Ian
brother,
said
man.
that on
Stop
Sunday he got producer anxiety listening to the
Why?
award-winning pregame show because you and
Why?
Derek wouldn't read what the GM said. I had it pulled up. You're like, oh no, this is a figure of speech.
You guys
were
yelling, blowing break times, just getting into it. And I was like,
Okay.
I can't handle this.
Hey, can I give you an illustration? If I be like, man, that dude's a dog, that don't mean he's a golden retriever.
But if you say, man, that dude's a dog, look at his collar and look at how he licks from the bowl, you would be talking about a dog. And when he said, hey, in the game, we fumbled it and they recovered it and they fumbled and they recovered it, he's talking about the ball.
No, he's not talking. Jared, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
When I'm talking about my puppy and the fact that he licks his own rear end sometimes, I'm talking about how my puppy licks his own rear end.
No, he's not, man. But it's a figure of speech, man. They like, hey, man, that dude is a dog. It ain't like he's a little miniature poodle. That don't mean it's a figure of speech. Like, man, he's got something in him. It's a figure of speech, danggummit.
Oh, my goodness.
It ain't nobody. When I say it's nobody like Jared.
Christopher Dwayne Sanders, as always, on our program. Appreciate you, Chris.
I love you, big bro.
Yep, Chris
Appreciate
Sanders
you,
on our program. I mean, again, the crux of the argument was Derek and Chris said it was a figure of speech when Rand said the ball didn't bounce their way. The problem with that was in the actual thing that he said, like the actual article. After he said the ball didn't bounce our way, he talked about instances in which the ball did not bounce their way. I'm like, he is talking about the ball. He's talking about the ball. It's like TD said on the pregame show. He says, if somebody says, hey, you kill it on the radio, I don't actually mean you're killing somebody. I'm like, right. But if you're like, you kill it on the radio and you do it with a knife and you go right to the gut and now you are talking about that. That's what he was doing. He was talking about the ball. But again, I digress. 615-737-1025. Speaking of Rand, there was something Trevor Matich said yesterday. And you know I love Trevor, just like I love Chris. And I could not disagree with this more. We'll get to it next. I'm going to Company 1025 The Game. Stillman and Company 1025, 1063, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. By the way, a special edition of Jared versus Joe at 4 o'clock today because the Predators have a biggin tonight against the Washington Capitals. I do want to know. Never mind. They have a big one against the Washington Capitals today, so the pregame's on at 5 o'clock. And I believe Robbie will be handling the pregame. Robbie will be on the pregame. So Jared versus Joe at 4 o'clock today. So let me say this. I absolutely love me and Chris Sanders last week. Chris Sanders and I, we got in a knockdown drag out on the air last week. I still love Chris Sanders. And I disagreed with him and Derek on the award-winning pregame show. But I still love them, and I still think that they're very wise football guys, and certainly they've got the skins on the wall for what they did for the Titans. I love Trevor Maddich. I do. And I think Trevor is a true football savant. But yesterday he came on the program, and he was assessing what ails the Titans, and I have to say, I completely disagree with what you're about to hear out of a guy whose opinion I respect more than you know. Here's what Trevor said. Is that a reflection of the coaching when you think they have better talent than what they're executing on the field?
Yes, it is. It's either that or that the players aren't responding to the coaching. It's one of the two. And if the players aren't responding to the coaching, they got to get out. They got to get rid of those players. It's one of the reasons why this offseason, I was pretty upset with one of the players on offense that didn't seem to be having mental focus like I thought he should have in practice. And I called that out, right? Well, getting the best out of players in practice and in the meetings is what leads to the games. And that's one of the reasons that, for example, Nick Saban at Alabama, I think is a great example, and people can relate to that. You can say the same thing with Bill Belichick during his heyday with Tom Brady with the Patriots. You watch those teams play, and they didn't beat themselves on game day. You saw them perform at the highest level that their talent would allow, each individual doing their job, and then the opposing team had to beat them, just beat them. You and I have talked a lot about how at right tackle, there's been plenty of times when sacks and pressures have been given up because guys have their technique has been so bad that they couldn't stay in front of a defender, so the defender would have to beat them, and this is part of the problem.
So Trevor's saying that the Titans issue is not a talent issue. It's not a roster construction issue. And again, Trevor's not saying that the Titans have a great roster. He's not saying they're the Ravens, but he's saying it's not a roster issue. It's a coaching issue. And I completely disagree. Does Brian Callahan need to do a better job? Oh, yeah. Are there concerns I have about Brian Callahan's coaching when I watch the games on Sunday? Like the timeout management that they didn't have a problem with last week, but for the most part have been an issue this year. The special teams coach, etc. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But the Titans' problem, in my opinion, is roster construction. Top to bottom. It's why Mike Vrabel, who, again, we know Mike Vrabel's a good coach. We may not like Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel may have done things that, again, at the end seemed rather arrogant. Vrabel's probably not as good of a coach as everybody makes him out to be, but Vrabel's a good coach. But it's why Mike Vrabel won 6 games last year. And that was with Derrick Henry. Because, again, the Titans roster, in my opinion, is poorly constructed. And it's not just Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker's fault. It is mainly their fault. But again, John Robinson missed on those drafts, and it's hard to patch it together when you miss on a plethora of picks. But again, when it comes to roster construction, I had a pretty good idea this team wasn't going to be very good. And it was because I kept noticing in training camp in these practices, they didn't have a right tackle. The guard that they drafted 11th couldn't stop guys I had never heard of from the Seattle Seahawks in joint practices. The Titans spent money this offseason. Again, they didn't spend as much as everybody makes it out to be. They, according to overthecap.com, have the 26th highest payroll in the NFL. So it's not like they're a high-end payroll, but they did spend some money this offseason. But the money they spent either can't catch Calvin Ridley, can't get on the field, Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed, and isn't at premium positions, Tony Pollard and Kenneth Murray. They entered camp with no right tackle, no right guard. The tight ends are all backups. Chig is a backup. Wiley is a backup. Vanette is a backup. And that's terrible for a team that is trying to bring along a young quarterback. No right tackle, no right guard, no a receiver that can't catch, and no starting caliber tight end. That's terrible roster construction. And I got peppered by everyone endlessly this offseason. I kept making the joke, go ahead and mail them an offseason Team of the Year trophy. But as far as winning games in the season, I was concerned because I knew, minus the quarterback being the chosen one, that they had serious problems they created for themselves. I will never forget how many people tweeted me in March and April when I kept saying they don't have a right tackle. And this was before everybody started to believe the Kool-Aid the Titans were selling, which was that Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a.
PT.
That PT could start at right tackle. Most people went into last offseason thinking, no, you're right. They need a left tackle and they need a right tackle. And so then before the Titans started telling everyone, no, we think PT will be our right tackle. I would complain in March and April about how they don't have a right tackle. And people would say, it's only March, Jared. And I'm like, right, because when you get to September, there's nothing you can do about it. That's the reality. That's the problem. So do I think Brian Callahan has his issues? Absolutely. Do I think Brian Callahan is making some rookie mistakes? Of course. Am I disappointed in the caliber of experience on Brian Callahan's coaching staff? Yes. Special teams, again, we don't need to go down that road, but I do think Robbie called it either a clown show today or he said they were morons. I can't remember which one he said. Either would have been applicable. But I disagree with Trevor. This team does not stink because the coaching is bad, because the coaching is either bad or it's not getting to them. It stinks because the players on it stink. That's why. Because the Titans have used premium assets on a guard and a defensive tackle who doesn't hit the quarterback. By the way, Ian, do you know how many pressures Braden Fisk selected one pick behind T'Vondre Sweat has so far this year?
I mean, no, I don't. I saw he had a couple the other night.
Yeah, 2 sacks. 26. 26 pressures. When does T'Vondre Sweat plan on pressuring the quarterback? Well, Jared, he's a great run-stuffing defensive tackle. Good. Take him in the 4th round. That's when you take that. Again, you don't pay a running back $8 million after you drafted a running back in the 3rd round the year before when you don't have a right tackle. So I love Trevor, and I get what he's saying. And I do think there was too much sunshine pumping out of Brian Callahan and too much excusing of mistakes in camp. But I don't think that's why this team's bad. I think it's the roster and the construction of it. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game. Want to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I absolutely love Hiller. They are my guys, and Hiller will take great care of your home. They take great care of my home every time I need them. In fact, I may have to call Hiller up here at some point here in the near future. And I just go online to happyhiller.com, schedule an appointment on my phone. It's very easy. Hiller's Cash for the Holidays promotion is back, and they're giving away cash for the holidays with select purchases. Get a $500 Visa gift card when you buy select new HVAC systems or a new whole home generator, or get a $250 Visa gift card when you buy a new tankless water heater. These deals are only available until the end of the year, so schedule today by visiting happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
I thought the Titans played much better from a standpoint of execution. To me, this team is the problem is not that they don't have enough talent to compete. I think they have enough talent to compete with most teams in the league, not the top tier necessarily, but with most teams in the league. The problem is they've been executing really poorly. I thought they executed better. They made fewer mistakes. They did more things up to the level of their capability against New England. Yeah, now New England is awful, but the Titans are also awful. And you could say that this was a game that went to overtime, therefore these two teams are equally awful. But at the same time, you look at the trajectory of the Titans, and the announcers during the game were talking about, and really the last several games have talked about how this team is not as bad as its record. Well, it is what its record is, because that's why the record is there. But I think what they meant to say is this team is not as untalented.
That was Trevor talking about the New England Patriots game, saying, the Titans started to do better things. And yeah, you'll say it's because the Patriots are awful, but blah, 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 blah. I do love Trevor. I don't mean to minimize what he said. I'm just saying, you get the gist of that. And that's not the first person I've heard that has looked at Sunday's game and acted like Sunday's game was some sort of proof of concept that the Titans are developing and growing in the right direction as a good football team. And I hear that, and I'm like, did we watch the same game? You guys do realize that 3 weeks ago, you played the Buffalo Bills on the road in Buffalo, and that the Buffalo Bills might be a Super Bowl contender, and they smoked you. Then you played the Detroit Lions on the road. The Detroit Lions might be the best team in the NFL. Florio, even though they lost a game, Florio has them atop his power rankings, Kansas City number 2. And you got smoked. Then you come home, you play the lowly Patriots that, if the draft were held today, would be picking number 1 overall. You dominate them in certain aspects, and you still only win the game by 3 points in overtime. In fact, a lot of the same mistakes you were making against Buffalo and against Detroit, a lot of those same mistakes you made against the Patriots. The difference is they don't have Jared Goff to make you pay for it. They don't have Josh Allen to make you pay for it. They don't have that defense the Lions have. And even today, Brian Callahan was asked about all the pressures. John Glennon, God bless you, I love you. But he asked why they got so much pressure on the Patriots. Here was the question, here was the answer.
According to PFF anyway, you guys had like more than double the amount of pressures you've had any game this year.
We pressured more in this game. I think certainly in the second half, there was more pressures. Some of that was the quarterback, trying to keep more people in the rush lanes. But yeah, there was an uptick this week, certainly, versus what the last couple of weeks have been.
I mean, come on. PFF says you guys had way more pressures than you normally get because you played the 32nd ranked offensive line in the NFL. That's why. Because you played a first-year head coach and his coaching staff that might even be more clueless than your coaching staff. The Patriots lost the toss in overtime and then decided to go into the wind. So I keep hearing all this, on Sunday, you guys finally showed, well, on Sunday, we were able to X, Y. No, on Sunday, the Patriots were horrible. That's why. You're not going to, do you think you're going to go on the road to LA and have the ball at the 5-yard line and have the quarterback misfire it into the tight end's hands, the tight end not catch it, and it get intercepted in the end zone for a touchback, and then give up 2 massive punt returns, and then do all the things that you did? If you go to LA, and again, the LA Chargers, they're not a Super Bowl contender. They're certainly not as bad as they were when Brandon Staley was the coach, because Harbaugh, as we know, he buttons it up a little bit. But if you only score 1 touchdown going the length of the field the entire game, you're going to lose against LA. You can do it against Patriots. Can't do it against LA. By the way, Arden Key had a strip sack. It was the key play in the game. A strip sack with 7 minutes to go. They fumbled the ball. Drake May, Ramondre Stevenson tried to jump on it, couldn't. You jumped on it. You got it, whatever. Their left tackle with the Chargers is a Pro Bowler, not the Scarbini that the Patriots had out there. Everyone's acting like Jeffrey Simmons played his best game of the year. Yes, because he was going up against total bums. Wasn't going up against Penei Sewell this week. Oh, wow, the Titans scored 20 points. Again, they've been kind of stuck on 17 in almost every single meaningful game. And that's because the Patriots have the 25th ranked defense. And it went to overtime. You got an extra quarter. Pretty much scored 17 points, but you got an extra quarter, so you scored 20 this time. Wow. Look at the improvement they showed against the Patriots. To me, it was the same Titan team that just got beat by 32 points in Detroit. The same Titan team. They just played a lesser opponent. It's like college football in the SEC this time of the year. 1 week you play LSU. The next week you play the Citadel. Guess what? You can get away with things against the Citadel that you can't against LSU. And I got to tell all you so that I know so many people are just glossing so hard over this. Like, again, John Glennon, God bless you. Love you. Mean it. But at the same time, it's like PFF says you guys got way more pressures. Yeah, because the Patriots stink. This is not the 2004 New England Patriots that you just played on Sunday. And I do not understand how many people are just kind of shrugging it off like, oh yeah, nah. Simmons had his best game and they moved the ball and they, like, Trevor, yeah, some of this might be because the Patriots are awful. Some of it, they can't get lined up on the opening kickoff. I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. 615-737-1025. We'll get to some phones. 615-737-1025. Though I will say this, there are two things I do want to give Brian Callahan credit for. While we do sit here and rip on the win, and we do sit here, Trevor says the coaching's the problem, not the roster construction, which I disagree with. But there are two things there. So we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game.
Key has had a lot of success the last couple of weeks himself. He done anything different, or just finally having some luck getting through?
I think his individual work on the side, some things he's focused on, similar to how Calvin, has been putting some different work in. That part's paid off for him. Arden always plays with a ton of energy and a ton of effort and passion, and so that part, I think you see it starting to break through a bit for him. He's winning his matchups when he's had chances to win, and that's what we need from him.
That was Brian Callahan on Arden Key. By the way, did you hear what Kaharski said this morning? His Arden Key take?
I'm not sure.
I was like, if I said something like this, Kaharski would be like, oh my God, he's got a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. He's making stuff up. He doesn't believe that. That's what would have come out of Paul's mouth. Verbatim. If I had said what he said. Paul made the comment that on Sunday in the locker room after the game, Arden Key wore a St. Louis Cardinals hat. Paul said that he had never seen Arden Key wearing a St. Louis Cardinals hat, and because there had been trade speculation that Arden Key might be dealt to the Arizona Cardinals, Paul was wondering if he was trying to send a message by wearing an Arizona or a St. Louis Cardinals hat. Come on, Ian, you got to admit.
Sounds a little fishy.
That if I said that, everybody would be saying Jared Stillman's making crap up. Jared Stillman's got a tinfoil hat on. He said because Arden Key wore a St. Louis Cardinals hat that he was wondering if he was sending a message to the Arizona Cardinals to trade for him. But I digress. So the two things I'm going to give Brian Callahan credit for right now, because I do think this is important, is that there are players on the team that are getting better. And Arden Key is an example of a guy who weeks 2 through last year of 2023 through week 6 of this year didn't do anything. Now, all of a sudden, the last couple of weeks, Arden Key's turned into a sacker. Now, some of that's because he was going against the Patriots, but the Lions are a good team, and he sacked them too. He brought up Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley still has trouble catching the ball, but the last 2 weeks, Calvin Ridley has made some impact plays. That I got to give him credit for. The second thing is the team still plays hard. And I do think it's because the backbone of the team is, I don't know if they have like great leadership to be better than they actually are, but I do think those guys are never going to stop playing. Rand Carthon said that in the ball not bouncing their way comments. He said, hey, our guys play hard. They show up every day to practice and they practice hard and I don't doubt that. Even when I saw things I didn't like at training camp this year, I never sat there and said, hey, these guys aren't busting it. Now, apparently Colt Anderson said the effort was bad on special teams against Detroit. I'll have to take his word for it. But for the most part, they seem to be playing hard. 615-737-1025 and our phones are driven by WilsonCountyHunting.com. Justin in Greenbrier says, I see both sides of the argument about the Titans roster construction versus the Titans coaching. I don't believe they have great players in the premium positions, but even on the Titans teams in the past with better coaching, those less talented players played above their pay grade. So what Trevor is saying is also true. I think both things can be true at the same time. Here's where I'll disagree with this. Go back to the Whisenhunt year, because we all lived it. Go back to the Whisenhunt era, specifically the 2015 season. The Titans started off something like 1-7, and they fired Ken Whisenhunt. Mike Mularkey, who, while I know you guys didn't like him, Mike Mularkey was a good coach. Mike Mularkey, a good coach, takes over, and they finished like 2-5. They had no shot in those games down the stretch. They lost at home to Brandon Whedon at quarterback. The next year, they have DeMarco Murray, Jack Conklin. I think they made 7 additions on offense. Ben Jones, Rashard Matthews, Josh Klein, etc. They're a 9-win team. Mularkey, coaching the same bums Whisenhunt had, won 1 more game. That's it. And Mularkey, again, I think was a pretty good coach. Plus, in the NFL, it's always about the players more than it is the coaching. Now, bad coaching can hold you back. And I think the team you're about to play this week is an example of that. Now, I don't think they were perfectly constructed with their previous regime. And I think Harbaugh, while I would not have drafted Joe Alt, maybe because I wanted Joe Alt to be a Titan, while I wouldn't have drafted Joe Alt, I would have taken Malik Neighbors for Justin Herbert. I understand what Jim Harbaugh was doing, and it's worked. So there's something to that. But again, even that's a roster construction thing more than it is the coach setting them up for success. The one thing I would question the coaching on when it comes to the Titans is I would question the coaching on why do guys leave here and play better. Elijah Molden has 3 interceptions this year. What? I mean, the guy that they gave away for nothing, they had to go sign some guy I've never heard of to play safety today because they lost Quandre Diggs.
Mike Edwards.
Am I supposed to know who that is?
He got released from the Bills on Tuesday. That's all I know.
But so you don't know anything about
Elijah Molden got a game ball this week.
Again, I mean, hey, he's not good enough to play.
Who else got a game ball
this week
for the Chargers?
Who else got a game ball for the Chargers? Joe Alt.
On defense. No, he's on defense.
They give away multiple game balls on defense at the Chargers?
Yeah.
Ooh, Floyd wouldn't like that. Okay, let me guess.
In the locker room.
Christian Fulton.
No, but close.
Not Fulton.
I don't know. I'm not sure I knew he was on the team. Tier Tart.
What?
I think he got a field goal block or something.
What? Tier Tart?
He got a game ball, and so did Elijah Molden.
I mean, goodness gracious. That is and again, like Callahan didn't coach Tier Tart, and he didn't really coach Molden because we never saw him coach a game with Molden out there. But that is something I'd be looking at Mike Vrabel saying, what happened there? One texter says, so where do the Titans start, Jared? What's your first move to fix it? I think I've been abundantly clear with this. I think you have to start over this offseason with your football decision-making. I think Chad Brinker has to be let go. I think Rand Carthon has to be let go. And they need to bring in a guy with experience that has run an NFL team before. And Amy's got to kind of stay out of it. And then you let that guy decide what to do with the coach. And until you do that, I don't think you're going to get any better because I think you're going to be taking guards and defensive tackles with high picks. And I don't think that's a good idea. And again, when I say defensive tackles, I don't mean all defensive tackles, but I mean the run-stuffing defensive tackles that the Titans drafted, who doesn't pressure the quarterback. Have you seen his run grade? Yes. And Tier Tart can do the same thing. And he was an undrafted free agent. And I don't need to use the 38th pick on that. I need to use the 38th pick on a big-time playmaker, not a run-stuffing DT. And I don't think the Titans are going to change because I think they believe what they believe. And I think you're going to find the same roster construction issues if you keep running it back. One texter says, Jim Harbaugh got Ladd McConkey in the second round, who has been a good addition. Honestly, their top 2 pick was better than the Titans' whole draft. Talking about Alt and McConkey. So I saw the Midday Show talked about this. There was a segment where they went over my reaction on draft night.
Yes, and Adam made sure to remind everybody you guaranteed the Chargers would not take Joe Alt.
I did guarantee that. I mean, Harbaugh kept telling everybody they were going to take Joe Alt. So I assume when somebody tells you that they're going to take them, they're not going to take them. Remember the year before, the Colts kept telling ESPN they were going to take Will Levis. Every ESPN person said they're going to take Will Levis. And then they didn't take Will Levis because that's what you do. Harbaugh was just like, yeah, we're going to build the offensive line first. We're going to offensive line. I'm like, there's no way he's telling the truth.
And now Alt's playing right tackle.
Alt is playing right tackle, and he's playing it very, very well. He's a very good player.
And the Titans drafted a right tackle and are playing him at left tackle.
I have noticed the irony in all of that. That said, The Athletic today put out their all-rookie team, and J.C. Latham is the second tackle behind Joe Alt. And you didn't have the option to take Joe Alt, so I can't be mad at you. Do you know who the top 2 rookies are? Apparently, everybody says these are the top 2 rookies across the board.
Oh, offense or defense, just both?
Well, they both play offense, but it's the total rookies. One's obvious.
Oh, Daniels.
Yes.
Okay. Neighbors?
Brock Bowers.
Okay.
This Brock Bowers
too,
is the guy that, and who was the guy that, again, I said, you can't get Alt, got to get Bowers. And I was banging the table for Bowers. And look, Latham's fine. He's a good player. He's a player at piece you build around, but I really think that Bowers might end up being, Kittle, Kelsey, Gronk, that kind of player. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, the Vols are in if the playoff were held today. And I've got thoughts. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company. 615-737-1025. Speaking of the college football playoffs and college football, we got a lot of college football to remind you of, including our game of the week on 94.9 The Fan this Saturday at 6:30. Alabama and LSU. Our game of the week is presented by Twin Peaks. Take your tailgate to Twin Peaks, home of 29-degree drafts and wall-to-wall sports. And on 94.9 The Fan this Saturday, Vanderbilt takes on South Carolina with the pregame starting at 1:30 and kickoff at 3:15. Good luck there. And then 93.3 Totally Hits Nashville will have MTSU football on Saturday. The Blue Raiders are at home taking on Liberty. Pregame starts at 10:30. Kickoff is at noon. MTSU football on 93.3 Totally Hits Nashville is presented by Sloan's Motorcycle ATV.
Paul, tell me this. What was your biggest surprise with these CFP rankings?
I think the fact that schools that probably haven't accomplished anything this year, Molly, have been rewarded so handsomely. And I know I'll upset all the folks in Bloomington, but I'm still not sure what Indiana has done. They've beaten some very mediocre non-conference teams. They've blown out a couple of other ones. And also Penn State, which has done absolutely nothing this year. Their best wins are over Illinois and a 5-loss Lincoln Riley Southern Cal team. We'll save that for another day. But I also want to caution everyone, just like you hear up and down the dial and other things. It's very early. A lot of these schools are going to take care of themselves. So I'm not going to go mad dog here and start screaming about the first reveal because we're still 5 weeks away.
That was Paul Feinbaum today. The first college football playoff rankings are out, and this is different than the years past because, again, this is a 12-team playoff. And so this morning when I saw that the Vols were ranked 7th in the initial college football playoff rankings, my eyes opened up a little bit. Again, 7 out of 12. Alabama's in there. Boy, Alabama gets more credit by brand awareness alone than any other program in the country. It's sickening.
It's like Kentucky basketball.
It's unbelievable. And so Alabama is 11, and they've already lost 2 games, and UT beat them. So now I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. If the Vols lose to Georgia, who's 3rd, that probably should still be good enough to get in. If Alabama's 11th, and we know that some of these other schools that are in there are going to lose too. If Alabama's 11th and the Vols lose at Georgia, they'd have 2 losses, and they would have the head-to-head win over Alabama. They also wouldn't have a loss to Vandy. We'll get to that in a second. I mean, that makes me think they're probably going to get in. They won't lose to Mississippi State. They won't lose to UTEP. But that's when this gets good. Because what it means is that it all comes down to Vandy. And I don't know. Look, this would be a question I'll ask Chad Withrow on the hot seat on Friday. But if you're a Tennessee fan, can you actually take the Vandy game for granted? Ian, you're not a Vols fan, but if you were, I feel like you know them well enough to be able to put yourself in their shoes. If you were a Vols fan, would you take Vanderbilt at the end of the year at Vanderbilt for granted?
No.
I don't think you can. I heard Feinbaum today because Stephen A was talking about Alabama being ranked, and he kept talking about losing to Vandy, and Feinbaum was like, look, I know that it's Vandy, but let's not get too worked up because Vanderbilt just went on the road and beat Auburn, and Vanderbilt has had a good season, and Vandy's good. Like for a college football team, Vandy is good, and they proved it when they went toe-to-toe with Texas. Well, Texas didn't walk into that stadium with everything to lose. And this is what I am an anti-12-team playoff guy. At least that was my premise at the beginning. Now, I am, unlike some of these other people, I am willing to give it a try, and then if I end up liking it, saying, hey, I was wrong about that. That's how I felt about the designated hitter being in the National League in baseball. I remember saying, no, the National League, the pitcher's bat. And I like it that way. And then the COVID year happened, and there was the designated hitter for both leagues. And I walked out of that thinking, no, I like it. I don't want to watch pitchers bat anymore. Everybody gets a DH. And I liked it. So I may end up liking this 12-team playoff. But this means in this case, all the marbles for the Vols to make the playoffs, because they're probably going to lose to Georgia, but they're not going to lose to Mississippi State or UTEP. It all comes down to Vandy. And now put yourself in Vandy's shoes. Look, every win Vandy gets is another notch in the belt, and it's another kind of this dream season they've had. It's another memory to last a lifetime. But it's not as if Vanderbilt has a shot at making the playoff or Vanderbilt has a shot at winning the SEC or anything like that. But I cannot think of a more storybook ending for Diego Pavia's one season at Vanderbilt than to knock Tennessee out of the college football playoff. That's what rivalries are all about. And I know Tennessee looks down on Vandy as a rival because they got Alabama and they got Georgia and they got Florida and but I'm just telling you, If you lose to Vandy with the playoff on the line, woo, that I would absolutely love. And then the other thing, when I said that, hey, I'm against a 12-team playoff, but I'm willing to see how it plays and say that, hey, maybe I was wrong and 12 teams are fine. I thought we should have gone to 8. This is when we had Power 5 conference. I thought we should have gone to 8, 5 automatic qualifiers, 3 at-larges. Seems to make sense to me, but they wanted to make more money, so they decided to do it their way. But when I looked at the bracket last night and I saw Indiana and Tennessee at Neyland Stadium in a playoff game, and keep in mind, Feinbaum's right. Indiana hasn't played anybody this year, but Indiana can light up the scoreboard, and they got a quarterback now. I kind of get excited. I mean, I think a playoff game at Neyland Stadium would be freaking rocking. And the other thing about these games are it's not going to be Scarbini State that's there. It's not like Austin P is going to be the team that they play. It's going to be Indiana, a playoff team, an undefeated. Now, Indiana probably won't be undefeated, but it'll be a one-loss team. It'll be the good of the good. So I got excited yesterday when I saw that ranking and I saw the Vols right there at number 7. And I did the math in my head saying, well, even if they lose to Georgia, they're still probably making the playoff. I know they're not losing to Mississippi State. Mississippi State's awful. I know they're not losing to UTEP. So that means it's all coming down to Vandy. That's exciting. And then a home playoff game at Neyland Stadium. That's exciting. Against Indiana. That's exciting. This is not, again, just like it's not your typical Vanderbilt, this is not your typical Indiana. That's exciting. One texter, I'm pretty sure is a Vanderbilt fan's upset. Well, I take it not. I guess not. Tennessee. He says Tennessee's the only SEC team that's undefeated against ranked teams, and we are 7th. I know it's early. These rankings don't matter, but still, I'll just say this. I don't have a problem with Tennessee being 7th. In fact, I think Tennessee's a little overrated. I thought they were going to choke up the game on Saturday to UK. They can't even kick a field goal. One text says Vandy is about to run out of steam. A lot of injuries, no depth. They will lose their final 3. Maybe. But they were a 6-point dog last week, and they took it to Auburn. Now, Auburn sucks, but they took it to Auburn. And again, do you want to count out, texter, do you want to count out Diego Pavia at home in his last college game ever against UT? I wouldn't. Jared versus Joe is next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Predators pregame in an hour. They got a big one tonight in Washington. I do not say it is a big one unless it's actually a big one. You know, I will not say it's a big game if it's not a big game. I'm not selling tickets. But it's a big game tonight because they're in some trouble and they got to get themselves out of it. Caroline is here. Hello, Caroline.
Hello. How we doing?
Outstanding. Big game tonight for the Predators, by the way.
I am shocked to hear you say that.
You know me. I'm anti saying it's a big game if it's not actually.
It's not a big game. If they lose this one, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Big game should mean something.
Unfortunately, when you start 4-7-1, all of a sudden these road trip starters become big games.
Yeah, big one, 12 games in. Pretty wild.
It's
Pretty
like
wild.
when you're 50 pounds overweight, yeah, you can't have 3 cheat meals a week. I mean, it just is what it is. With that, Joe Rexroad is with us on the program. Joe, how's the knee?
It's good. Thanks. I'm not going to have surgery, so that's great news. Thanks for asking.
Good. All right, time for Jared versus Joe.
Jared Stillman versus Joe Rexroad. Now on Stillman and Company
on ESPN
102.5 The Game.
Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Caroline.
Good news about the knee, Joe. So Jonathan Mingo traded to the Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. Mike Williams traded to the Steelers for a 5th-round pick. Should the Titans have waited a little bit closer to the trade deadline to bump up DeAndre Hopkins' trade value? Jared, start with you.
You know, I didn't even think about this until Ian brought it to my attention yesterday. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. Mike Williams for a 5th? And the same for DeAndre? And DeAndre is clearly Kansas City's number 1 wide receiver. And I think Andy Reid knew, hey, like, we're going to trade for DeAndre. We got nothing at receiver. When we trade for DeAndre, we will put him out there. And as soon as we do that, he's going to be our number 1 guy. And they threw it to him like he was their number 1 guy, and he produced like he was their number 1 guy. And I do wonder, like, did the Titans get raked over the coals on this? They ate the money. They got a 5th-round pick, which is really a 6th because Kansas City's probably going to be in the Super Bowl. So it's the very, very end of the 5th round. And the conditions in order to get that pick are crazy. He's not going to play 60% of the snaps. Not only that, Kansas City will hold him out the last game of the year just so that they don't have to give that pick. Could they have waited a little bit longer and not put up with DeAndre's tantrum on the sideline? I think the answer is yes. I think Kansas City, they circled DeAndre. They knew that this was their play. They knew the owner wasn't going to pay. It's not the cap. They had plenty of cap space, but it was that they knew that they didn't want to pay. And so I think that they really got everything they wanted out of the Titans, and the Titans are going to end up with a low 5th-round pick. Bad deal.
The only thing I'd push back on the question is I'm going to remove the Mingo thing from the equation because Jerry Jones is just awful. And like, I can't even, like, they're often the outlier and that deal is ridiculous. And so I can't look at that as a guide, but I agree. Like Mike Williams, that's an eyebrow raiser when you see him get the same thing. I mean, I guess I would agree. Yeah, sure. Or just when you do make the deal, don't agree to these terms. You know, I mean, like in my mind, the 4th was a 4th, just sort of made sense for Hopkins. So I mean, if you could have done this as a 4th that could elevate to a 3rd, that would have been good. I don't think it's going to be a lot different from what it was, but and look, in saying this, I mean, I have to raise my hand and say I wasn't saying this at the time, but yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. I mean, you know, ultimately, you got less value than you should have for the guy who absolutely is the Chiefs' number 1 receiver, and you could see it in the last game. He and Patrick Mahomes. I said this before they traded for him. I said the Chiefs should get him because he's kind of like the Kelsey of receivers against his own coverages. He just has a great feel for it. He and Mahomes will have a great chemistry. They're going to be great friends in the next few weeks, and that is going to look like a great deal for the Chiefs, which means not a great deal for the Titans.
I mean, again, and I know this sounds crazy because you can only trade what they're offering at the time, and maybe they weren't offering more, but you didn't have to give, you didn't have to just give him up. And that you didn't have to, you had a couple more weeks. The idea of, we want to get something instead of nothing. Do you really think that the way Kansas City treats DeAndre, that they would have ripped that offer off the table? They need him.
Yeah, there's always a chance they look elsewhere, find something else, right? Go with somebody else. But, it's not like he was the only guy they could have traded for. But, to me, it's pretty much best case scenario for them to get a guy of that quality for what they gave up.
And again, what's that say about the Titans that they're getting raked over the coals on the one big trade that they made? Now, the Ernest Jones trade was fine, but they got raked over the coals on the DeAndre trade. Again, what's that tell you about the Titans? But I digress. Caroline, what's next?
Okay, Joe, you go first. Looks like Derrick Henry could be a freaking MVP candidate. DeAndre Hopkins popped off for the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Malik Willis now all of a sudden looking like a pretty solid NFL quarterback. Elijah Molden and Tier Tart both got game balls. Do the Titans have a problem when the players that they've had that have underperformed overperform elsewhere?
Well, it's terrible for fans to see. I think some of the answer here in general is just going from bad teams to good teams. Like, Derrick Henry, obviously a great player here. Down because he was doing it for a bad football team with a bad offensive line, and he still produced the way he did. Now he's in a perfect situation. But when you ask that question, obviously we're also talking about different coaching staffs, right? Like the Tart thing was Vrabel and those guys having a meltdown. I think we all knew that Tart was talented. He had a big issue with Vrabel, and Terrell Williams had a big issue with him. So I think they're all, they're on an individual basis. So from a fan perspective, it's got to be infuriating, and I totally get that. We all knew Hopkins could play. Again, Henry's in a perfect situation for him with a guy who I actually think might actually win the MVP while Derek gets Offensive Player of the Year, which is Lamar Jackson. I think that combo could really happen. But, the Willis thing is the one that I just look, good for him. He took advantage of his opportunities. Good for Matt LaFleur for tailoring things perfectly and making it, taking advantage of his skill set and hiding his weaknesses. I don't feel any differently really about Malik Willis as a player as I did when he was here. I think he got better. I think he got better this offseason. That's the thing. I thought I saw improvement from him, but not enough to. He's not going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. You think he's going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, Jared?
No, but I think he's a solid. I think he's a better backup than your number one backup, Mason Rudolph. From what I've seen.
Yeah, look, he came in here and won, so that's the bottom line. He came in here, made some plays and won. He's made some good plays, made some key plays in the Jags game. Good for him. Certainly I give credit to what they did with him, but I just fundamentally he's the whole goal for him once we kind of saw what he was as a player is, can you entrench yourself? What's realistic? Can you entrench yourself as a backup quarterback in the NFL? And I think he has, so good for him. But let's not get crazy with that one. I think if Malik Willis had a stretch with the Packers where like Jordan Love was really hurt and Malik Willis had to play like 3-4 games in a row, I think we'd see some of the same stuff we saw here.
Okay, I say it's very bad. I think it is bad that every single player that leaves the Tennessee Titans goes to another team and plays much, much, much better. And I think it's also very bad that every player that comes to the Tennessee Titans plays much, much worse. Mason Rudolph, he never turned the ball over last year for the Steelers. He comes in here last week against Detroit. He throws the ball right defensive lineman like he's Will Levis. L'Jarius Sneed, remember L'Jarius Sneed, lockdown corner, top corner in the league. L'Jarius Sneed, when he's on the field for the Titans, he hasn't been that good. So I've got Christian Fulton and Elijah. Elijah Molden has 3 interceptions. That would tie for the team lead on the Titans. Tier Tart got a game ball. Malik got a game ball. Malik came in here and looked like Michael Vick. DeAndre lighting it up on Monday Night Football. Derrick Henry.
But don't you see? But don't you see the differences here? Like, we know Derek's great. We know DeAndre's great. I mean, I'm not going to lie.
DeAndre Hopkins was as good as DeAndre Hopkins looked on Monday night when he was here with the Titans this year?
He was in a terrible offense, and he had 75 catches for almost 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. Yes, that was a tremendous performance. Look, I haven't watched a second of Elijah Molden this year, but I put him in the Willis category. Okay, I mean, who was screaming that, oh, my God, how did you let Elijah Molden go? Yeah, it's depth that they could use.
Me?
So I think that's a mistake.
Me.
But, like,
I was screaming, Joe.
Really?
Yes.
You were screaming?
Yes.
Okay, play it for me. Play it for me.
I mean, again, how am I supposed to pull that out of my ass right now? I can pull it out of my ass by the end of the show,
play
probably.
It tomorrow.
But I will
to me tomorrow.
I will play it tomorrow.
You were screaming.
I was against it.
God, Elijah Molden.
I was against it.
No.
Not because I thought Molden was good, but just because they carried like 3 corners on the roster. And I'm like, hey, you know, if you're going to have no corners and no safeties, you might as well keep the one guy that can play both as a backup. But again, my problem even with that.
That's not screaming.
My problem even with that is that, again, these guys all look like Scarbinis when they are here, and then they go somewhere else and they play well. That's the problem. You keep saying it like we're supposed to be the coaches that are supposed to evaluate these guys properly. That's not our jobs. But like, we didn't see Elijah Molden look like that. It's their fault that they didn't see Elijah Molden look like that.
Scarbini. Derrick Henry was not a Scarbini here. DeAndre Hopkins was not a Scarbini here. They're great players. We already knew that. I'm just saying there's difference.
How many talks did we have about, is Derek slowing down? Is this the same Derek? I don't know. Doesn't look like the same Derek to me.
Lots of people said that. Sure.
Right. So with every single one of these guys, they go to a different team.
Player.
They go to a different team. Every single one of these guys goes to a different team. And then when they go to the different team, they ball out. And then we're told, well, but the Ravens have a better offensive line than you do. Well, why don't you draft? Offense. Why don't you draft Roger Rosengarten in the 2nd round? Now, you got to draft the run-stuffing DT who never hits the quarterback. I mean, it's crazy. And then it's like these other guys, the Scarbinis, Willis, it's like, well, you know, the offense they have in Green Bay is just a good offense. And LaFleur, they're just, why can't my coach do that? Why can't my coach put Willis in position to look like Michael Vick?
Right. I'm essentially agreeing on that. Like, obviously, they did a better job when he was deployed in utilizing him. But again, than the past coaching staff, right? I mean, because obviously Willis didn't have that opportunity here with.
Well, it was this coaching staff that collaborated with this front office to trade Malik for a bag of footballs, which they then bragged about to Nick Suss. About to Nick Suss last week is going to transform the roster.
Tremendous embarrassment what he did here. Again, I don't think differently about it. I just think these situations are different, very different from each other.
Were you in favor of Malik for a 7th rounder with Green Bay when the trade was made? Because I was not, but were you?
I swear to you, I really don't remember, but it was sort of like, okay, it was a shrug. I mean, I thought that he would make the team, and why not have him around? I remember, the only thing I remember really was being happy for him, because it's like, wow, he can actually be a QB2 somewhere. Good for him, you know? But again, I'm still not outraged by it, because Malik Willis is going to be a backup in this league. What he is.
Okay. So I am outraged by it, because I don't think that the going rate for a backup quarterback should be a pick value of 1 point. And that's what they got. Again, we just talked. They got raked over the coals on the DeAndre deal. Derrick Henry still has it, and they just let him walk. I mean, at some point, don't we have to look at this and say, this is a massive problem with this organization. This team has no corners and no safeties, and Elijah Molden's getting a game ball in L.A.
Yeah, in some cases, yes, but let's come on, man. Derrick Henry, which, of course, we've all talked about a million times in a million different ways, you know, you have to take a leap to think that he was coming back here, even if they did go after him.
So what's amazing about the NFL is they have this thing called the franchise tag, and you can use it, or you can threaten to use it.
So you're telling me that, here's another receipt I need you to find me then. You're telling me you screamed for them to tag Derrick Henry this year.
I said they should keep Derrick Henry.
Your plan was to tag Derrick Henry.
Again, I would have kept Derrick Henry, because I would have treated Derrick Henry differently, reportedly, last year than they did. You know, I wouldn't have tried to trade him for a 4th round pick with the Ravens like they reportedly So I always want to make that because Rand says that didn't happen. But so either your people at The Athletic are lying, Joe, or
no,
it's
Eric DaCosta or Rand is lying. It's Eric DaCosta or it's Rand.
Right.
One of them is lying.
So I would not have. I would have been telling Derrick Henry from the jump in the middle of last year, like, "Hey, we're rebuilding this thing, and you're a big part of it. And like, we want you back. We want you. We're not trading you because we want you to be a part of this." And then I did say that I wanted Derrick Henry back, and I said I wanted the leadership and I wanted the stacked boxes for the young quarterback, and I still thought he had juice in him. And then when you're negotiating the contract and you've got the leverage of the tag, you can use it in order to get a good deal. You don't have to use the tag, but you can say like, hey, like Derrick, if you don't sign this, 3-year, $31 million contract we're going to tag you. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, that's probably better. So, okay, I'll take the deal.
Look, Derrick Henry is in a perfect place for him. It's been amazing to watch him. And it's not the offensive line. It's the scheme. It's the quarterback. It is a completely different alignment in front of him that he sees play after play playing for that team than he did here.
I disagree with this because with the Derrick Henry that won the Offensive Player of the Year, ran for 2,000 yards, did it with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. Derrick Henry is good.
Yes.
Derrick Henry did it in high school. Derrick Henry did it in
Sure.
college with Jacob Coker as his quarterback and won a national title.
Right.
Derrick Henry did it with Ryan Tannehill, and Derrick Henry's doing it with Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry's career is not dependent upon Lamar Jackson.
Jared. Derrick did that with Ryan Tannehill when Ryan Tannehill had 33 touchdowns, 5 picks, and was one of the top 5 performing quarterbacks by any metric in the NFL in 2020.
Some would argue
with
that
A.J.
Derrick was
Brown.
probably a big part of that.
Sure, they helped each other. To sit here and say, "Oh, he did it with Tannehill, that was the peak of his career."
No,
I mean,
my thing
so
is
now we're
Derrick
getting
Henry
into
is a great
disrespecting
player. Derrick Henry's a great player because Derrick Henry is a great player, not because he's playing with Lamar Jackson. Because a lot of Titan fans are saying
so.
that.
Jared, okay. So Jared, then why couldn't he overcome last year? Then why wasn't he doing this?
Derrick
if
Henry
he could overcome any situation.
Did you
then
watch the
why didn't
Jacksonville
he?
game, Joe? Did you watch the Jacksonville game?
Jacksonville game?
Yeah.
The one game, yeah, I know. I know Derrick's great, but again, the numbers were way down the last 2 years. Why is that?
Because the Titans are stupid. That's why.
Okay.
Because the
So
Titans didn't. They put Andre Dillard at left tackle and Aaron Brewer at center.
So is he or isn't he somewhat dependent on other factors? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, again, if you have Aaron Brewer at center, it doesn't matter. Tyreek Hill's team has Aaron Brewer at center, and they can't win a game because Aaron Brewer can't block. You can't have nobody blocking.
There we go.
But this idea that Derrick Henry's only good because of Lamar, that's bullcrap.
We found the answer. It's Jared's obsession with Aaron Brewer is the answer to all things football. Thank you, Jared.
I mean, the Dolphins certainly aren't the same with Aaron Brewer at center. More Jared versus Joe to continue next. Presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. 102.5 The Game.
Jared Stillman versus Joe Rexroad. Now on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN
102.5 The Game.
Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Jared, you go ahead and go first. You had Open Book Barry on your show yesterday, and my goodness, Open Book Barry was quite the open book.
I've turned into his therapist.
You are his therapist?
I have turned into it, apparently.
I honestly think that you may have. I do kind of think sometimes, like, does Barry know that he's on the radio? Like, this isn't just a private conversation between the two of you. Like, he's just telling about all this stuff. Great. Okay. Wonderful. Appreciate the openness. But he did mention how if the team doesn't turn things around, he will, quote, start the rebuild plan, which your reaction was hilarious to that, by the way. If you weren't watching the stream, hilarious. How long should Barry's rebuild leash, so to speak, be?
Boy, that's tough. I mean, it depends on where they sit. For me, on U.S. Thanksgiving, that's kind of the line of demarcation. If you're not in the playoffs on U.S. Thanksgiving, you have a 25% chance of making it. And again, there's different levels of how good or how bad you are. I think, the rebuild is probably a strong word for what Trotz was talking about. And then he kind of clarified it in a follow-up interview he did with Alex Doherty in the paper. What I do believe is I think that what Barry Trotz has decided is, okay, if we don't start winning at some point, and it wouldn't surprise me if Trotz waits until the first of the year to do this, but U.S. Thanksgiving is a pretty big line of demarcation in the NHL season. But it wouldn't surprise me if Trotz says, okay, instead of the number one priority being to win games for this club, instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take guys like Michael McCarron out of the lineup, Tommy Novak out of the lineup, Mark Jankowski out of the lineup, Alexander Carrier, Dante Fabro, those guys out of the lineup. And I am going to put in Fedor Svechkov. And I am going to put in Joakim Kimmel. And I am going to put in, and you're not, it's like Floyd used to always say about rookie quarterbacks. Yeah, every now and then one might win, but you're probably not going to win much with a rookie quarterback. So I'm going to put these guys out there and we're going to take it on the chin, or we're going to go whichever way they go. And it's going to be about developing these guys and not about winning with Stamkos and Marchessault and Yossi and Forsberg. That's what I think he really means. And again, I guess I would say U.S. Thanksgiving, if you're within a moonshot, then maybe extend it out to January 1. But I mean, if they keep losing and all of a sudden they're 8 points or 10 points out of a playoff spot or something at U.S. Thanksgiving, then I think you'll see Trotz pull the plug right then and there.
Caroline, remind me exactly of the question again.
How long should Barry Trotz's rebuild leash be?
Yeah, I mean, this conversation is actually asinine. I mean, it really is, and I agree. It was a amazing moment. Oh no, I know. Believe me, I'm talking about Barry Trotz. I'm not blaming you for the question. I'm talking about Barry Trotz. It's asinine. And again, it was amazing to see what he said and Jared's reaction. That was and his openness is very appreciated in this industry. Dude, you just paid for all these people who are on your team who are under contract. You know what you need to do? Go get a number 2 center. That's what you need to do. I mean, that is such an empty threat, the rebuild plan. Oh, great. So you're going to bring up Svechkov and some of these guys who aren't even as good as the guys who are struggling now. And I promise you, we will find that out.
I'm not convinced that Svechkov's not as good as Tommy Novak. I think Tommy Novak stinks.
Oh, all right, fine. Okay. I'm not going to nitpick that, but it's not a difference-making player right now. I think someday Kimmel will be. But you can't do the rebuild plan. You can say that on a radio show and everybody, oh my goodness, and react to it. It's asinine. You need to go get a number 2 center and they better go win. You are locked in. You are locked in with these guys. So now it's like, oh yeah, let's take it on the chin while we're paying all this money, while we just paid our goalie. We've paid, Yossi and Forsberg previously. We just went and got Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea. Yeah, no, let's bring up some young guys and just take it on the chin, and I'll just eat it together. No, go get another good player, and then they better win. He has put himself in this position, and I like all the moves he made. By the way, I was excited as anybody else. but it's just it's a joke, and he can't possibly think that there's any real maneuvering. I know, like Alex Doherty, got him on the phone after he went on your show, and he sort of put some cold water in this stuff because it's just ridiculous. You are locked in and must win now, and you must do everything as a GM to win now. And this team badly lacks a number 2 center, so go do that.
I got to say, if there was anybody else, I would probably agree with everything you just said. But I don't think Barry Trotz is a guy full of empty threats.
Oh, the golden goose. Yes, that's right. The sacred cow, Barry Trotz. Can't criticize him. Okay, no, go ahead. Tell us.
So I think that Barry Trotz was sending a message. And again, he did kind of walk it back with Doherty by saying he can't tear it down to the studs. But I do think he's going to take those, like he's going to take the Novaks and the McCarrons out, and he's going to put the other guys in there. And he's not going to, I don't think he's going to go try to throw draft picks to go, we're going to try, we're 20 points out of a playoff spot. We're 8 points out of a playoff spot. We're going to try to go all in right now. I don't think that, personally, I don't think that's going to be what happens. I don't think that he's going to double down on this. I really don't. And the reason I don't think this is the case is because of what Barry said when he said, I was trying to delay. I was trying to buy time. He brought in these players so that they could win this year and next year while the younger guys develop at the minor leagues and then bring them up. And then it be kind of a transition from that team to the next. But if he was trying to buy time and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It sounds to me like Governor Haslam is on board with him with that plan. And I could be totally wrong. And I could be a total sucker. But I think that was, that whatever Barry told us, he's already told Bill Haslam, and Bill Haslam's already on board with it.
But Jared, like again, what he said was a whoa, and your reaction was whoa. So you're telling me in that moment, you're like, oh wow, he might move like Novak and a couple of these guys out of the lineup and bring in Shvetsov. I mean, that's not. I mean, that's not some earth shaking. Like he does not have much that he can do.
Right, but the goal at that point, Joe, is. Again, they always try to win, but at that point, the goal with Stamkos and them out there is not to win; it's to develop the young players. And
well, that's just a joke. That's
what I think Trotz is talking
hilariously stupid. I mean, come on.
I mean,
you don't do this, and then after, and again, it's early. I mean, I have no idea. It's been very disappointing how this team has played, but you just invested so much in winning, including your young hotshot goalies off somewhere else. You paid Sara, all these things, and now it's November 6th, and we're talking about this. He was sending a message.
By the way, there's a chance that he went to Bill Haslam and said, like, hey, if this doesn't work, I'm going to do this. And Bill Haslam sitting there thinking, you just spent $100 million of my money. There is a chance that that's what happened. You know what I mean?
You're saying he said that, Haslam said that, then he went to Doherty? Is that what you're saying?
No. That there's a chance that the owner looked at him cross-eyed when he said, hey, I know we're off to a bad start, but this doesn't work. But there's also a chance that Trotz laid it out and said, hey, I think these guys can still play. This is going to give us what I think is a competitive team for a couple years while we develop these young guys. But if it doesn't work, then X, Y, Z. And we'll never know the details of what actually was said between the two. But I do think that's a pretty important part of this.
There's no young guy right now other than, Kemmel is, I think has a chance to be, to be like a top 6 kind of guy at some
Edstrom.
point. Yeah, there's other guys who are further away in terms of when they're gonna get there. But like, if you bring up young guys and it helps you win, great. We've seen that before. Your beloved John Hines, who by the way is doing pretty well in Minnesota, I must say. And that's fine. But if they come up and you're worse for it, oh, that's all right. Let's just stick with it. We're getting the young guy. Sorry, Stamkos and all you other guys who are making all this money. It's about the young guys now. There's no way that's happening.
That's what that is what I believe he was saying yesterday.
Not happening.
Again,
it's an empty threat.
I disagree. Caroline, what's next?
The first college football playoff rankings came out yesterday. So based off of those, Joe, do you think that the Vols make the 12-team playoff?
Yes, I do. I think that right now I couldn't pick them at Georgia. I do think their defense is too good right now to let that game get totally away, especially as much as Georgia's struggling on offense, making mistakes. I think their defense, it gives them a chance in that game. I wouldn't pick them to win, but I'd pick them to be competitive, more competitive with Georgia than they've been under Heupel. And then you win the other games, and I think you're going to get in if you're Tennessee at 10-2. I heard Jared talking about it, and I agree. The Tennessee at Vanderbilt games is sizing up to be quite an event here in this town, and Vanderbilt's possibility of knocking the balls out of the playoffs, and they absolutely have a chance to win that game. But I would pick the Vols to lose to Georgia. I would pick them to beat Vanderbilt in a good game, and so that should add up to a playoff spot.
Here's my thing. With Alabama at 11, if all Tennessee does is lose to Georgia, I can't see how they keep them out. Because Alabama already has 2 losses. One of those losses was much worse than losing to Georgia, which I guess, Alabama did beat Georgia. But the loss to Vanderbilt is not the same as, losing to Tennessee like Alabama had.
You could argue the loss to Arkansas is much worse than the loss to Vanderbilt.
Arkansas does suck. So Alabama at 11. Tennessee beat Alabama head-to-head. To me, that is the committee saying that if Tennessee loses to Georgia, they will not push them past Alabama. If they lose 3 games, then they're behind Alabama. But if Alabama's in right now, if Alabama wins out and they end up making it, I cannot see a 2-loss Alabama being ahead of a 2-loss Tennessee, given that Tennessee beat Alabama. So other than Diego Pavia beating Tennessee, which I'm not ruling out because Tennessee finds every which way to choke in big moments in any sport except apparently baseball last year. And because there's something about Diego Pavia that wouldn't it be so Pavia, his last game at Vanderbilt or his last big game at Vanderbilt in this one miracle season he's had to knock Tennessee out of the playoff? It would be like the movie Rudy.
It would be so Tennessee to beat Georgia and lose to Vanderbilt.
But then wouldn't they make it?
Then
I think they would still make it, but that just feels so Tennessee, doesn't it?
No, but it feels so Tennessee to not make it.
Yeah.
Like the Hendon Hooker game at South Carolina. Like that one was, by the way, who Joe wants on the Titans. But
give him a chance. Give him a chance.
I got to say.
Lions and Vol homer.
Oh, he's such a homer. I got to say, I think Tennessee's making the playoff. And not only that, I was very anti-12-team playoff. And I was anti-designated hitter in the National League. I'm open to being wrong. But when I saw that bracket come out last night and I saw Indiana at Neyland Stadium in a playoff game, I was like, that would be some freaking juice. So that's a little aside there. I do think that Vanderbilt is the one team that could keep Tennessee out of the playoff. I don't think they're losing to Mississippi State. I don't think they're losing to UTEP. So they'll lose to Georgia, but that's okay. But Vandy is the only roadblock. If not, they're in. Caroline, who wins this week?
So Jared wins this week.
All right.
It is because I am shocked at the lack of outrage for Malik Willis going to the Green Bay Packers and all of a sudden looking like a competent backup quarterback in the National Football League. Because how many conversations have we had about Malik Willis, about how he's too far gone, how he can't be a reliable backup, so on and so forth. And then he comes out and does this. How many weeks removed from being traded from the Titans? Even just a week removed from being traded from the Titans. So Derrick Henry's another thing, because Derrick Henry, I think, is going to be great or has the capability of being great no matter where he goes. But it's the Malik Willis thing and the Elijah Molden thing too that just is so puzzling to me. And Joe, I think it was Joe that brought it up, that this has been a thing with 2 different coaching staffs. That's even more concerning, that it's not just a coaching staff thing, that now it's an organization thing. Like that is concerning, and that makes me angry, and it should make fans angry.
Which I said, and also I said it was embarrassing that Malik, came here and won. I just don't think he's like some fundamentally different player now than when he left. That's all I was saying. But that's fine. Jared needed a win.
Ian, give me my bell.
I did give the bell already.
Oh, did you? Now, apparently, before you guys, we do have, Joe wanted to see proof that I was anti the Elijah Molden trade before the start of the season. So Ian has found the proof, and you guys evaluate for yourselves.
You better be screaming.
Why would I better be screaming? You said nobody was against it. I said I was against it.
No. You said you screamed about it. Oh yeah. Let's hear it.
Go ahead.
Let's hear it.
And let me say this. I am very conflicted with this Molden trade because on one hand, I don't think Molden's very good. I don't think Molden was a very good corner, and I don't think Molden was a very good safety. I don't think Elijah Molden's very fast. I don't think Elijah Molden's very big. And I don't think Elijah Molden can tackle very well. I also don't think he can run very fast. But at the same time, when I see that trade, all I can think in my head is, why? This team needs more defensive backs, not less defensive backs. And at least with Molden, there is some sort of capability that in a pinch, if he has to go play corner, he can go play corner. So when you break camp with 4 corners, 2 of whom are hurt, it's like, well, at the end of the day, if we have to put Elijah Molden there, who's our 4th safety, but if we also have to put him out there in order to play corner, we can. So that's how we can get by with not having any corners. Fine. But now you just trade him for nothing, and it's like, okay. Joe, I think there was some screaming in there. There was some raised voicing in there.
You oversold it, as always.
No, I did not. You said nobody objected to it, and I clearly objected to it.
Dude, I never said nobody. We had the same conversation on our show. The same thing. It was a fine take. Yes, we did. It was a fine take because you're right. Depth, but he's not very good. You think that you're like the only person saying obvious things.
Caroline, do you think that evidence qualifies for the standard of which Joe was requiring about the Molden take?
Well, if Joe was requiring yelling, there was not a whole lot of yelling there. That's just kind of your average volume. But it does, you were against the Molden trade.
Thank you. Thank you.
You were conflicted. He was conflicted. That's the word he just used.
Yeah, because all these players suck on the Titans, and then they go everywhere else and they play well. Right. Jared versus Joe.
Okay. You said you were conflicted. You were conflicted.
Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Guys, thank you so much here on Stillman and Company. And let me just say this. I did think Elijah Molden sucked because when he was on the Titans, he did suck, just like Malik sucked. Just like all these guys aren't very good except for Hopkins and Henry, and then they go places, other places, and they play even better. So disappointing. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game.
It's hockey night in Smashville.
Walk over to Yossi. His one-timer, he scores!
Bringing you the keys to victory and the latest storylines surrounding the Nashville Predators. This is Predators Game Day, now on Stillman and Company.
Predators Game Day presented by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ Anderson. Tonight, the Predators have a big one. That's right. They take on the Washington Capitals in Washington. It's a back-to-back. They've got Florida tomorrow. Gotta have them. At least gotta have one of the two. But gotta have them. And Barry Trotz sent the message yesterday on this program that the Predators absolutely, positively need some victories, and they need to dig themselves out of the hole that they find themselves in. The Predators enter tonight's game sitting at 4-7-1. That is good. Say good, but it's good for 9 points. Washington, meanwhile, they're hot 8-3-0, good for 16 points. So I never say it's a big game unless it's a big game. And I think given where this team sits, I think it's a big game. And that's my final thought, presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ Anderson. That's my guy. Robbie Stanley's my guy. He's up next with the pregame show. That's next. I'm going to company. We'll see you everybody tomorrow, too.